Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today we are finally going to be looking at every single team's 50-man roster cuts. Now, I've been doing the teams that have announced it day by day, but this is the video encompassing all 8 teams, fully cutting down their rosters to 50 players, as well as some of these being more of a, looking back on it a couple days later, looking at some of these players, whether or not they've signed places, or, kind of just how good they look and what it is. So if you want to look at a specific team, I have timestamps down below in the description, so go to there if you want to see a specific team or two. And without further ado, let's get started with the Arlington Renegades. Now, the Arlington Renegades had one really shocking player, and that was Devin Darrington. Now, all in all, they had sidebar net wide receiver, Devin Darrington, running back, Marcus Lucas, guard, Jared Maiden, corner, Darius Moraine, defensive lineman, Roderick Perry, defensive tackle, Christian Sam, inside linebacker, and Noah Taylor, defensive end. Now, the Christian Sam one, as we talked about, he had gotten put on the suspended list, so him getting cut wasn't really a shock. If you have 2 linebackers who are pretty much equal, but one of them suspended, of course you're going to release that guy. Now, in terms of Devin Darrington, really solid running back last year. This was a big shock. A lot of people expected him to be the RB2. We knew he wouldn't be number 1 ahead of Devion, but the fact that he didn't even make the roster is a big shock. I think that even though I don't think there's any team he would probably start on aside from the defenders with the Abram Smith injury. I do think that there's a lot of teams he would be a really solid backup on. And again, I think there is an argument that he could be a great starter for the defenders. I wouldn't be pretty shocked if he ends up not signing anywhere. I think this is a really solid running back that still kind of shocked he got cut. And there was a couple other somewhat surprising moves here, but that was the real massive shocker. Seeing a guy like Darrington get cut on a team that wasn't really super strong at running back compared to, this isn't like the Michigan Panthers who had 2, legit number 1 running backs. This is a team that had a really, really legit number 1, and then everyone thought Devin Darrington. I guess not. Now, the next team is the Birmingham Stallions. The Stallions, at least still, right now, we don't know about Victor Bolden Jr., whether he retired, got suspended, is just kind of out of it. Don't know for sure, but in terms of what we do know is that the other 2 Boldens, Bubba and Slade, safety and wide receiver, are both released, as well as Cole Cabral, center, Oshaya Douglas, offensive lineman, Malik Hall, outside linebacker, Myron Mitchell, wide receiver, Chauncey Rivers, defensive end, and Henri St. Amour, defensive end. Looking back at this, I kind of underappreciated or undervalued just how big a shock the Boldens are, especially Slade. A lot of people were pretty high on him, and Myron Mitchell, I saw some people defending him a lot. The fact is, for me, and I've seen other people in the comments that have agreed with this sentiment, which they actually said it before I fully did. Well, we both kind of did. The point is, him or Deon Cain are, I view, pretty similar tier receivers. When I watched the Stallions last year, I thought Deon Cain provided much more of an effect, especially in the postseason. Myron Mitchell isn't bad, but now, granted, if Victor Bolden is gone, it's a bit of a shock they released him and Slade. But the fact is that if one of those 2 guys were to either be put on the bench or to be cut, I thought it would be Myron Mitchell. I thought that all in all, he is a slightly worse receiver than Deon Cain. Why would you keep a guy that's slightly worse? That's why I expected Cain to make it. Cain did make the roster. Myron Mitchell didn't. That's why he's released. As we talked about it before, Henri St. Amour is a massive, massive shocker. If you saw yesterday's video, there's a couple of former breakers now that are available that I would be very shocked if John DeFilippo does not get. Henri St. Amour is one of them. Now, again, I did mention there's a sneaky chance that he goes to Houston. He ran with Keontae Schott and was one of the best duos at pass rushing last year. But I would not be shocked if he goes to either one of those teams. This is a very, very good defensive end. This is one of those guys that's probably in that tier 2 of defensive ends. He's not in the elite tier, but he's just outside of it. A really good player. I'd be shocked if he doesn't sign anywhere before the season starts. And again, the Boldens all being cut is pretty shocking, but that's how it goes. The Stallions are an insanely loaded roster, so seeing some great players get cut isn't too surprising. It is what it is. And the DC defenders, Kentrell Bryce, safety, Matthew Carrick, guard, Jordan Evans, linebacker, Jazz Ferguson, receiver, Greg Long, tackle, Takarius Tisdale, defensive end, Tim Ward, defensive end, and Zaquandre Wright, running back. Nothing's really changed since then. The bottom line is I view it the same way. Zaquandre White kind of got screwed over. He got signed a couple days, before the cuts happened. It was right after Abram Smith got hurt. Probably didn't get a truly fair shot, got released. Sucks, it really does suck, but it is what it is. Tim Ward, really shocking cut, and then he got signed to the Brahmas to go back with Wade Phillips. Takarius Tisdale, I would expect somebody to probably sign him. Jazz Ferguson, I've seen somebody be pretty shocked at. I agree. I know that, everybody always likes to say how talented every room is. On paper, the defenders have the weakest receiving room. So when people are high on a player like Jazz Ferguson and he gets cut, it's a bit of a shock. But all in all, that's pretty much how it is for the defenders. The real shockers are the defensive ends. But just like with the Roughnecks, you're so loaded at that area, it's not the worst thing ever. Remember, this is the team that got the number one player from the Roughnecks on the defensive side. So even though him and Ward would have made a great duo, not super shocked to see him get released. It just, it's going to suck if they end up losing to the Brahmas because Tim Ward has like a 2-sack game. Now, the Houston Roughnecks, speaking of them, this is where I had what many people would consider the biggest shock of them all, and that was Manny Bunch, safety. He was an All-USFL player last year, but there's questions about injuries, questions about other things about him, and he got released. Then Isaiah Chambers, another really shocking one. This is a dude who, if I'm not mistaken, was the leader in TFLs this past season for the USFL, defensive end. But like I said before, this is a team that added a ton of other defensive talent, especially on the D-line. And again, if Chris Odom is back fully healthy from his ACL tear, are you really going to say that you're going to start Isaiah Chambers over Adam Rodriguez and Chris Odom? You know what I mean? And that's not even it. And in terms of pass rushing ability, they have Keontae Schott among other guys. It's one of those, it really does suck to see. This is a guy that I would expect to sign somewhere else. But it just, if it was on any other team, he would have made the roster. But when you're talking about this Roughnecks team that has so many good defensive linemen, not the biggest shock. Ayinde Ile, linebacker. Jeffrey Johnson, defensive tackle. Jair Joseph, tackle. Robert Myers, offensive line. Rodell Rahman, tight end. And Marcus Tatum, tackle. Rahman is a bit of a shock, but they had a few tight ends they ended up grabbing during the offseason to, see what fit their system best. I'd imagine these guys are probably mainly for the blocking, but we'll see. All in all, none of those are as shocking as the top two. I do expect both of them to probably sign somewhere. There's a lot of teams that could use guys like them, but we'll see. And the Memphis Showboats, we talked about this one yesterday. Just a couple of really good players are available now, like Dominique Daphne, tight end, DJ Daniel, corner, wide receiver Rashard Davis, Chance Little, guard, Ryan McDaniel, receiver, Shahid Salman, linebacker, Ty Smith, corner, Cam Sutton, tight end. Those corners were really highly graded, especially DJ Daniel. To see a guy like that be available is a pretty big deal. There's a lot of teams that would be immediate upgrades at their cornerback position if they get DJ Daniel. So I do expect him to sign somewhere for sure. The receivers, I wouldn't be shocked if any team were to sign him basically. But mainly like the Brahmas, Defenders, and Panthers, they should be going after those guys. And the fact is that these are not the only cuts I expect the Showboats to make. I expect them to make some releases to have roster spots open for certain other guys, like Andre St. Amour or Gerard Fernandez, which we'll get to in a bit. Cam Sutton, it's hard to know exactly how much of this is his play and how much of this is him kind of just getting screwed over by the whole other Cam Sutton incident with, the Detroit Lions Cam Sutton, who has the warrant out for his arrest. But all in all, this is one of the more shocking ones. I think all in all, this had the most shocking releases of every team. So that's pretty much how the Showboats fell. In the Michigan Panthers, Gerard Fernandez was the big shocker, middle linebacker for the team. Everyone expected him to run with Frank Gidna to have one of the best duos in the entire league, and instead he's available, and as I said before, I fully expect him to go to the New Orleans Showboats. I was about to say Breakers because they're basically just getting all the Breakers. Yeah, John DeFilippo's Showboats are very much becoming the Breakers. As we've talked about before, it's just like the Brahmas with the Roughnecks. They're just getting as many players from their former team as possible. Then, of course, Vontrell McMillan, defensive end, Jamal Milon, defense tackle, Samson Nakua, wide receiver, Nasir Player, outside linebacker, Gene Pryor, tackle, Toa Tua, running back, Alex Thomas, corner. Guy like Tawa, not a shock. They have two really good running backs, so it's just kind of that, odd man out kind of issue. Samson Nakua, some people were shocked at it, and a lot of people were really shocked with Nasir Player. Definitely some shocking cuts from the Panthers, but none of them nearly as bad as Gerard Fernandez's cut. That really shocked everybody. We'll see how that works. It's not like they have a ton of linebacking talent compared to a team like the Stallions, so we'll see. Then the St. Louis Battlehawks, Kevin Atkins was probably the biggest shock. This is a really solid defensive tackle for them this past season. Again, not one of those elite players, but one of those, glue guy type of players, just a really solid, good player that you could count on. Him getting released, a bit of a shock. Nico Bolden, outside linebacker. Darion Chafin, wide receiver. Omike Egbule, outside linebacker. Chris Garrett, defensive end. Drew Lewis, inside linebacker. Stephen Mitchell Jr., wide receiver. Dallas Warmack, tackle. The receivers that I've talked about before, even if you view them as high upside talent, the bottom line is the Battlehawks just have so many truly elite wide receivers that if you're not one of those elite guys, it's pretty tough to make the roster. I mean, when like Darius Shepard is arguably your fourth best receiver on your roster, you've got a pretty good roster, or a pretty good receiver room. Then Kevin Atkins was a huge shocker, and then some people I've seen be pretty shocked at the Garrett or Bolden releases. Oh no, this is definitely one of the more shocking in a lower end sense of some of these players are solid, but I'd expect a couple of these guys to probably get signed somewhere, mainly Atkins. I think that's a really solid player to add to a team that, like the Michigan Panthers, who have a bit of a deficiency at the defensive tackle position, but we'll see. Then the last team is San Antonio Brahmas. They only cut a few guys. I think there's some guys that maybe be put on, the IR, suspended list we're thinking about, but Kaliki, Anyalabeki, inside linebacker, Terrence Lang, defensive end, Mark Milton, corner, Calvin Turner, wide receiver, Jordan Vesey, wide receiver, and Jared Williams, tackle. Now, Mark Milton, another one that got kind of screwed over. He signed like 2 days before the cuts happened, so never got a fully fair shot. Then Vesey and Turner are both shocking. I know since I made the video, a lot of people have talked about how, praised Turner was during the last couple days or the last week of the training camp. And to see him get cut is kind of that, like, double-edged. It's just, I don't even say double-edged sword is the right word. But it's just, this is a guy that a lot of people are very high on in terms of, like, in the organization saying, oh, he's having this awesome training camp. Let's cut him. Look, I mean, the Brahmas, do they have upside at the receiver position? Yes. But is their receiver position better than, like, half the league? No. So getting rid of a guy like Calvin Turner, and especially Jordan Vesey, that's a really big shocker. Vesey is especially one that, like, why? It was a really solid receiver this past season. Again, not elite, but a really solid one who I would say a lot of people would say should start on that team. And the fact that he got released is a bit of a shocker. So both the receivers getting cut, especially because Calvin Turner can play basically like any skill position on offense. I believe he's had time at quarterback back in college or something, as well as running back. So you cut a very versatile player for no real reason. This is definitely one of the bigger shockers. There's still a lot of shocks that we've seen. I mean, this whole training camp offseason has really shown just how crazy spring football is. Seeing guys like Luis Aguilar get cut very early on and never re-sign, at least to this point. Or seeing guys like a Gerard Fernandez and Randy Bunch get cut. We've seen a bunch of these shocks, and I guess it does show how talented this league is compared to the past couple seasons of spring football, when some of these truly elite players aren't even making rosters for one reason or another. So it's pretty crazy. But all in all, this has been Zomfox. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. As I said before, Tuesday will be the Week 1 Power Rankings video, where it's going to be a good one. I mean, the Power Rankings have shifted a lot because of a couple injuries and a couple signings. And then, of course, I have my game picks coming out sometime this week. So be on the lookout for those as well. And as always, have a great night.